Hello and welcome to What Did I Miss, where today I'm reviewing the 5th episode of Star Trek Discovery, titled Die Trying, and looking for Easter eggs, references, and holograms. This week, I'm going to try something a bit different than usual, and give a spoiler-free review first, and then get into spoilers and Easter eggs after the intro. But let me know in the comments right now what you thought of the episode, and if you like the season so far. If the last episode seemed like a love letter to DS9 fans and the Trill culture that was established there, I thought this episode did the same for Voyager fans, as there were more than a few callbacks to the series, although Eagle Eye fans probably caught a really cool DS9 Easter egg in the episode too that I will discuss in the spoiler section. It seemed like the concept of Trinity was prevalent in the episode as well, or more specifically how three things become one thing. Examples would be the number of members of the away mission to Starfleet headquarters, how Stamets, Reno, and Tilly are a dysfunctional crew, or how the Admiral, Saru, and Burnham must coexist. It could also be alluding to the choices of the past, the consequences of the present, and the possibilities of the future that the crew of the Discovery must coexist within. I also really like the Giorgio storyline and have some theories about where that is going too. But I like the episode and I think it is steering the season in a good direction. And if you're enjoying my channel and this video, please smash that like button for me and subscribe to get videos throughout the week on Star Trek. This is What Did I Miss?
That's more your specialty.
Okay, last spoiler warning. So from now on, after the intro, we will be entering spoiler territory. And if you've been watching my videos this year, do me a favor and let me know in the comments if you like this new format. Thank you very much. The episode starts with Saru and Burnham addressing each other as Captain and Number 1 for the first time. The crew arrives at the coordinates to see a distortion field masking their destination, which reminded me of the distortion created by Shakari in the movie The Final Frontier. When they first arrived inside, I thought the interior looked very familiar to that of a Dyson sphere, which was shown in the Next Generation relics, but this may not actually be correct, since Burnham states that the structure is powered by the collective ships within it, and Dyson spheres are powered by a central power source like a star. But Lieutenant Nilsson does comment that some of the ships are made out of neutronium alloy fibers, and that is what the Dyson sphere was made out of. Neutronium is also impervious to phaser fire, so it makes sense that the ships are made from this. Once the ship is within the structure, they see many other Federation vessels, one being the USS Voyager J. Tilly says the Voyager J is the 10th generation of the ship, but Lieutenant Owo corrects her and says it is the 11th. For those of you that are not aware, the initial build of a ship does not have a letter designation after it, which is why the crew of the original series are on the Enterprise, which is destroyed in the search for Spock, and the crew is then given the Enterprise A. Both of those ships were Constitution-class vessels, and someone comments about seeing a Constitution-class vessel within this structure. The Enterprise B was shown to be an Excelsior-class ship, and shown at the beginning of Star Trek Generations, and the Enterprise C was in the Next Generation episode Yesterday's Enterprise. The D Galaxy-class version of the vessel was the main one used by the crew of the Next Generation until that was destroyed in the movie Generations. The E version did not last long and was destroyed in the movie Nemesis, and there is an F version shown in the Star Trek Online game. But let me know in the comments, what was your favorite version of the Enterprise? It is interesting that they chose to show the J version of the Voyager, since we actually saw a J version of the Enterprise in the Enterprise episode Azadi Prime, which took place in the 26th century. But the one that I like to see was the USS Nog, which is named after the character played by the recently departed Aaron Eisenberg on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. This warmed my heart as I really love the character, and if you have ever watched any of the interviews with him, you know that he really adored Star Trek fans and he was remembered fondly by his castmates. Once Burnham, Saru, and Adira beam over to Starfleet headquarters, they are greeted by Admiral Vance, played by Odette Fair, who is most well known from the Mummy and Resident Evil movies. We learn that Calamar joined the Federation and that the criminal syndicate we saw in the first episode is named the Emerald Chain, and that their leader is presumably named Asira. After they speak, they go back to an office for a debrief. I don't know about you, but I immediately got EMH vibes off the guy looking at Burnham and Saru, and sure enough, he is a hologram and seems to be an evolution of the Doctor, who was an emergency medical hologram that became the main medical officer on Voyager. The Admiral states that there are 38 worlds left in the Federation, which is curious considering the flag only had 6 stars on it. The Admiral also states that the Federation spent a good part of the 30th century, so as much as 200 years before this and 80 years before the burn, fighting for the Temporal Accords, which were a treaty of sorts created after the Temporal War, part of which was shown during the events of the show Enterprise. Because of this, time travelers are seen as criminals first, and the Admiral is more willing to treat them as such. As the scene ends, the Admiral asks Saru to put the needs of Starfleet ahead of the needs of his crew, which is a variation of the famous quote said by Spock that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Saru and Burnham discuss what to do, and Saru scolds her for wanting to circumvent protocol by getting the roster of planets by any means necessary. This scene really took me back to Saru and Burnham's relationship in the first season, and how Saru was scared of her for a good time and flat out called her dangerous. I know that he has evolved both physiologically and emotionally, so that he is not as frightened a character as back then. But Doug Jones is such a good actor, I feel like he was emoting some of that shocked fear that he had so often around Burnham in the first season, once again in this scene. Now as captain, he is able to steer her in a correct way, and I think this also shows a huge growth in his character. Next, we get to see some funny interviews with members of the crew with other holographic officers. I really liked how Stamets thought the question he got was given by Lieutenant Detmer, referencing their argument in the prior episode. Giorgio gets a more thorough debrief that really gives her character a time to shine. Scenes like this make it pretty obvious how she can carry a new show and why Section 31 is in development. The only character in Star Trek's history that you could compare her to is maybe Garak from Deep Space Nine, but with more of an ego, which the character played by David Cronenberg is able to draw out of her and use against her. For those not familiar with the work of David Cronenberg, he is a Toronto-based filmmaker known for the remake of the Fly movie as well as the movie Scanners from the 80s. Since the show films a good portion in Toronto, and with it being so hard to travel, it makes sense that the show would get a local sci-fi legend for a cameo. I think that it's pretty clear that he represents Starfleet intelligence, also given his different badge, and is possibly grooming Giorgio for a position within the organization. I also like that he calmly allowed Giorgio to strip away everything about him that she knew, the holograms, his glasses, his badge, and still he showed that he was a mystery to her, while he seemed to figure her out by the end of their interaction by revealing her emotional connection to a member of Discovery's crew. After hearing about the roster and the condition of the Keeley people, Burnham suggests finding the Seed Vault ship, which is no doubt a reference to the global seed vault in Svalbard, Norway, that holds seeds in case of a global crisis. Saru stays behind for the mission and Burnham takes command of the Discovery for the first time. I think having a woman command the ship is another callback to Voyager and Captain Janeway, the first female captain of a Star Trek ship on television. Following the theme of Trinity, there are also 3 women front and center on the bridge of the ship. The seed ship they are looking for is helmed by a Barzan family, which is the same race as Lieutenant Nan, but was first shown in the Next Generation episode The Price. She learns that her people joined the Federation in the 25th century, which makes sense because at the time of the episode they were not members of the Federation. On the seed ship, they discover a holographic representation of the family on the ship, and Burnham hears the same melody that she heard Adira play on the cello in the last episode. I think it is also telling that when they get on the ship, not only does Lieutenant Nan not need her normal breathing apparatus, but her eyes also change, signifying her becoming more like herself within the environment on the ship, which I think foreshadows her choice later in the episode. Culber and Nan discover the 3 female members of the family in cryostasis pods that look similar to the ones the crew of the Next Generation found in the episode The Neutral Zone. Inside the chamber, Burnham encounters the father, who seems to be going in and out of phase. This may not be intentional, but I couldn't help but think back to the Lower Decks episode Much Ado About Boimler, in which Ensign Boimler is caught out of phase and is sent to a ship that emerges from a cloud that looks very similar to the cloud that the seed ship was in. They are able to get the father to enter the password so they can retrieve the needed seeds, and after the father refuses treatment, Nan stays on the ship to fulfill his family's mission, and the chance to see her home planet again. Burnham leaves her on the ship, and Nan walks to the window to see the ship jump away. Did anyone else think about Nan's stuff at this point? Like, they jump away so fast, there was no time for Burnham to explain what happened and get Nan's stuff sent over to the ship, like her clothes. I know Nan joined the ship right after being on the Enterprise, but she had to at least had like a toothbrush. Upon returning to Federation headquarters and giving the Admiral the results of the mission, he states that they do not do 5-year missions anymore, which is a reference to the famous 5-year mission that Captain Kirk led the original crew of the Enterprise on. Before the episode ends, Burnham asks the Admiral about the burn, and while stating that the Federation does not exactly know what happened, he looks at her and says, "Unless you have some new piece of evidence that was lost over the last 120 years," which I can't help but think is another bit of foreshadowing to a development later this season. There's also something visibly wrong with Giorgio, as she seems to be lost in thought, perhaps examining her interaction with Starfleet intelligence earlier in the episode. My final thoughts on the episode are that I enjoyed it, and I like that Nan got an end to her story, as she is kind of a fifth wheel at this point. I really like that Dr. Kobler is more of a main cast member, and seeing him on the away mission and in the interrogation showed his range as an officer and an actor. The melody that Burnham was trying to get to the bottom of is interesting to me, and I'm curious as to why so many people are aware of it. I really enjoyed the callbacks to Voyager, and especially showing a ship named after Nog, a beloved character. But you let me know, what did I miss? Let me know in the comments if you have any theories as to what caused the burn. Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you know when my videos come out. If you like this video, please hit that like button, and I will see you next time on What Did I Miss?